What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy GS Luke here with our round 2 showdown stream out there for the Zurich Classic. Going to get you guys ready for all of your lineups tomorrow, which won't be the same format as today. Rather than the best ball format for round 1, it's going to be some alternate shot out there for Friday. So we'll talk about some of the changes when it comes to actually building your builds, talk about some of the strategy involved, some of the player pool constraints out there as well as any questions that you have down there in the chat. So first thing I need you to do is go ahead and smash that like button over there for the SHIPIT Nation crew, and also to go ahead and say hi in the live chat when you're filing on in. We already got Ross down there in the chat saying Luke. Always great to have you down there. We got Steven down there too. Says happy NFL draft day. Looking forward to seeing who the Steelers pick over there at 21. We have Darren, who seemingly had a bad day, says round 2 has to be better, right? I guess that depends on how your weekend started. If it started like mine, where all my single entries are cashing, starting pretty much at the top end of the leaderboards, no, it doesn't have to get better out there for round 2. But if you're at the bottom end, then hey, I guess it's only going to get better for you. So that's a matter of perspective. For your sake, I hope it goes better for you tomorrow. And you said you're a Cowboys fan. Oof. I guess you're used to disappointment then if you're a Cowboys fan. So maybe it's not that crazy of a week for you. What's going on, Robert? Welcome on in as well. Let's get ready out there for some of our lineups tomorrow. So first thing I like to look at when it comes to showdown is the weather. And that's going to be the same out there for tomorrow, because I really think there's two things you can find for an edge. It's going to be the weather, which I think the AM guys might get a slightly better side of conditions. And then also the game theory edge, because when we have a different tournament like this, a completely different format to work with, also new shots gained metrics to go out there and play with, we get handicapped a bit, right? We don't have all the different tools at our disposal. Our process isn't going to be quite as well-rounded as it typically is, which means any sort of an edge that you can go out there and grind out is where you're going to go out there and want to lean into. So out there with the weather on Friday, you'll see that in the first half of the day, and it does look a little bit less gusty than the afternoon. And though we don't have the actual averages from the golf course to lean on, I was trying to track the course average as close as humanly possible today. And what I noticed is that the first half of tee times definitely played a little bit easier than the afternoon. In fact, the first half of tee times played to under a 64 average. I think it was like 63.75 for a bit. And you can see by the end of the day, ended up just a little bit over a 64 average. So you weren't talking about like a massive difference, right? Went up by like 0.4 out there from the morning to the afternoon wave, which means that the afternoon wave probably played closer to like a 64.5 average, which was mostly due to the fact that it got windier, which is the same kind of trend that we're going to have for tomorrow. And because it is alternate shot, that's going to lead to a little bit more variance with your scores. Of course, an alternate shot, right? You don't have two balls out there on every single hole, which means you're going to see a lot more bogeys and doubles out there in this sort of day. So I would expect the morning guys to get quite a sizable advantage, because it's not even just the wind like you're going to get for tomorrow's action, but also the course drying out a little bit as the day goes on. So they got some rain out there on Wednesday. That's why they had lift clean in place out there for Thursday. Might even still be lift clean in place over there for Friday. We'll have to see what they decide to go out there with. But if it is going to be lifting clean in place out there for 2 days in a row, those morning guys with calm winds, receptive greens, lift clean in place out there could go out there and nuke this golf course to death. So I would say that one of the two edges that you can go out there and lean into would be going after some of those morning starters. So of course you can find that over here on the PGA Tour website. The stone over there on the SHIPIT Nation website is also going to have tee times posted. And of course, my projection sheet over there on my Patreon page is also going to have those on there. So any sort of website that you're using for your showdown stuff, make sure they actually have those tee times available. And if they claim to be a golf website giving you advice out there for showdown, if they're not giving you the tee times, or at least the tee time waves out there for every single day, then get a new showdown site would be my advice to you. So the other thing to go out there and lean into, guys, is going to be the game theory aspect. So to go back to the leaderboard here, that's going to be trying to fade the guys towards the top. And just like we normally have out here on showdown slates, a majority of your ownership is going to come on the guys that were in form. And after an 18-hole sample size, oftentimes we see people overreact to just Thursday's action. So, these guys towards the top, like a Kitayama group there at -11, really, I'd say like any of the groups that are -9 or better. So these T11 or better groupings are going to be some of your more popular players on the slate. And the further towards the top you are, so the Højgaard twins are definitely going to get a bump with the steam out there. That Morikawa Kitayama group, I think, is also going to get quite a bit of steam. These sort of players, it's not like they're unusable, right? You don't have to fade every single team team that is T11 or better. But if you're going to use a team that's starting towards the top end of the board, you better be sold on them because they might be double, sometimes even 3 times the ownership of some of the other teams that you have around them. So, this is normally the case with Showdown, but because we don't have shots gain metrics to go out there and lead us to some of the better teams, I'm blindly, almost completely blindly, just going to fade almost all of the top end of the board. And I don't want the guys that are completely out of forms, right? So I don't want like the Ryan Palmer, Zach Johnson crusty group, right? 2 guys that haven't really played good golf at all over the last 2 years, especially Ryan Palmer. He's been a bit of a train wreck for the last 6 months to a year. I'm not talking about going the whole way down here to guys that were completely defunct today. Of course, right, play is still going on. So some of these guys down here are going to finish a lot stronger than where they're currently ranked. But if you're finishing at, let's say, like -5 or worse, I'm probably not considering you out there for round 2 Showdown. Let's say you're hovering around the cut line, which is currently like this -7, -8 range, middle of the leaderboard after the first round. You're talking about teams that play decent golf out there today, aren't going to get nearly as much attention as the guys towards the top end of the board. And even if it's like this -9 guys, right? So, starting to get closer to those T11s, right? Maybe the fringe T11s, also all of these -8s. I mean, look, it's a massive grouping that you have there at -8. These are probably going to be my favorite players that you have on the board because they're going to be in form. They still had better than average rounds, all these -8 players right there, but they're not going to have nearly as much ownership as the guys starting out there at -9 or better. So that's my take on the ownership angle. You want to really be balancing that depending on the contest that you're entering. And if you're in one of the big GPPs, like the big $5 or $25, then you really need to balance that ownership and get different in 3-4 different spots. And because it's a special slate here where we don't have all the different tools that we're used to having, maybe you extend that to 4 or 5 pivots out there in a lineup. Heck, maybe even pivots at all 6 spots, because it's a slate where if there's going to be any sort of edge at all, like I've mentioning, right, it's by fading what the rest of the field does. And the other aspect to consider while you're doing this is that it's not just going to be one-to-one, the leaderboard positioning out there with their ownership, right? There's a lot more nuance to that, right? There's guys that are going to be overpriced, underpriced, compared to where they probably should be. But having a good projection site that not only is giving you the tee times, like I was mentioning before, that's a really simple thing, by the way, right? For these sites to go out there and give you, but also having really good ownership out there for rounds 2 through 4 Showdown is going to be of the utmost importance on a week like this, because if your game theory edge is going to come down to knowing what the field is doing, being able to fade those guys and, go out there and play that game theory edge, as we say, then you better have projections that you can count on. So over there at the SHIPIT Nation crew, they have a crew of sweaty tryhards that go out there and get the job done. Of course, I run my own website, my own Patreon page where I have all those projections I do myself. I have a lot of confidence in myself. I have a ton of confidence over there in the SHIPIT Nation crew as well. Hence why I'm willing to do content over there on their social media channels. I wouldn't link up with just any crew when it comes to that sort of thing. But whatever site you're using out there, right? I know there's a lot of other people that use other websites that are out there. If you don't feel comfortable with your Showdown ownership projections, then you might as well take the week off, because you're not going to find an edge over here in round 2 Showdown. You don't have the shots gained metrics to look at. Round 2 historical, right? We're not really going to have that out there for these groupings tomorrow. Really, a lot of the things that I rely on out there in my process, I'm not going to have at my disposal. And that's not just the case for me, right? That's the case for every other person out there. So if everyone is kind of running in the dark out here and you have accurate ownership projections, that's all you need to go out there and get an edge, because you know that almost everyone's going to be 50-50. You saw so many slapdick groups out there towards the top end of the board today. I mean, Celinda Velo, right? Not to pick on those two in particular, but -14. Oh my goodness, right? I don't think many people saw that coming out there on Thursday. Embrace the chaos, embrace the volatility, and play against the rest of the field. So SHIPIT Nation, my website, great web sources, great resources to go out there and join, so you know what the ownership's going to look like out there for tomorrow. But if you're one of those other slapdick websites out there that you can't get reliable ownership projections on, then like I said, you might want to take this one off, because I'm not sure you're going to be able to generate a massive edge out there. So normally we'd go through a bunch of stats here together, right? Try and give you guys a really good idea of what happened out there for the rounds, but we don't really have that. And over here at Bet the Number, you're getting really as good of data as what you're going to possibly find. It's a fairway and green stats out there for every single player, which usually guys at least got to the greens before they picked up their ball and didn't end up finishing today. So that's why they're able to give us some of these stats out there at at our disposal. But really, I think the best way to deep dive players and kind of do your stat keeping would be to go just over there on PGATour.com and follow some of their shot trails, because if you've seen, they do have some of the shot trails available for today. And, this top group's probably not a great example because it's just birdies across the board. But if you can find a group, like, I just know this because it tilted me today and ended up losing a bet out there on these two players. But like Bazane Hood and Eric Van Rooyen, they had a ton of birdie looks, but just could not buy a putt today. So, we don't have the shots gained metrics, the shots gained approach, the shots gained putting, that sort of thing. But I would argue that the ball striking stats for these two was a lot better than what they actually got out of their round, especially over there for Eric Van Rooyen. So, if you're willing to put in the work, kind of go through the shot trails of guys you're considering for your player pool. And I'm not saying you have to go through the entire field, right? All 18 holes, right? That would be impossible to go out there and do. But if you're considering a guy for one of your big lineups, like he's a conviction play you're going to go out there and use, a pairing is more so what I'm referring to there, then at least to glance through their round today. Like, for example, you go, okay, I'm going to play some Higo and Ryan Fox for tomorrow, right? I know we don't have the shots gained metrics to look at, but like go through their approaches and see, like, were they setting up a lot of putts from 20 feet and in? Like on the first hole, they both hit one within 20 feet. We're not going to look at the par fives because look at that. They didn't birdie that par five, but you should for sure be birdieing those sort of holes. Not the best approaches there. Let's see. Yeah, not the best approaches there. On conversely, right, if it was a lot of 15, 20-foot shots, but just not making the birdies, then you might want to consider those sort of players. And, it's not an actual science, right? It's no way to really automate this, at least based on what I have at my disposal. But if you're getting a lot of these like 10 to 15 footers and they weren't getting them to drop, then maybe you look for a little bit of putting regression over there tomorrow. So it's just an example of how you could do that, right? You could see on here, right? This is a hole where they both hit pretty decent shots and couldn't convert over there from the birdie perspective. So if you're seeing a lot of those kind of misses over there on a shots gained profile or a hole by hole profile over here with the shot trails, that could be another way to go out there and find some plays. But outside of that, it's more so using game theory, which you could use out there in those large field GPPs. So before we talk about any specific questions, I do want to talk about some of the contests that are available, and they're not great over here for tomorrow. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to try and make it sound better than it is, but the contest selection is absolute dog shit. This one is 15% to first place. So, your $100 single entries are always going to be a pretty decent contest to enter. And believe it or not, this 100 entry contest is the biggest $100 single entry that they are offering. This is not the secondary contest. The first one did not go out there. A primary did not go out there and already fill. That is just how small the contests are going to be. So you have a $200 single entry, but this one has a whopping 22 entries. The big $5 GBP is only a $10,000 contest, right? Normally it's $10,000 for first place. Well, it is at least a little bit less top heavy than it sometimes is, right? Sometimes it's like 25, 30% to first place. Now, at least it's only about 20% that you have out there to first. It's just normally this $2,000 price tag is normally what you're getting out there for third instead of first place. So it's not the best day to go out there and play Showdown. I think everyone kind of knows that with the event that we have going on here. But they do have some decent single entries that you can enter, right? You have that $100, you have this $33, maybe a little bit smaller than what you would like, but better payout structures than even what you have in those large field GBPs. So if you're the average player, just your average Joe Schmo going out there and entering a few lineups, this $12, that $33, I think are really good starting points. If you want to ramp it up a little bit, maybe you go to like the $100 single entry, and past that, you've got the $200 single entry, and then maybe considering going out there and like max entering that big $5 GPP. But it's not the sort of slate where DraftKings is going to post a whole bunch of GPPs. In fact, I didn't see a $20 GPP. Let's see. They do have the pitch and putt over here. This is the flagship GPP that they go out there and post. And it is super top heavy. It's just a little bit better than a fourth over there to first place, between the third and the fourth to first. And yeah, it's the only GPP that you can enter where you can make double 5 digits over there to first place. So they at least have that available for anyone that wants that lottery sort of contest. But personally, it's probably going to be the $100 single entry, and that's it over there for my exposure. I'm not going to have a whole bunch of exposure. There's a chance that I throw like 10 lineups over there into the $5, something like that. But I'm not going to overexpose myself on this sort of event, right? I said that over there for my main slate, scaled back my exposure on a week like this, and it's just what I do every single year. I try and play it. It's a fun event. I like to break it down over here on YouTube for all of you guys as well. But anyone that's telling you that this has a massive edge to it is just lying to your face. Like, there's not. If you think you know how all these teams are going to mesh up, you think you know how they're going to ham and egg it out there with the birdies. Like, there were some groups today that I'm sure had like 10, 12 birdies on the round, but they all ended up being like on the same hole, right? It was like all the par fives. So they went out there and birdied, and they probably only shot like maybe -7, -8 on the round. And then you have groups where they completely ham and egged it. Maybe they only had like 9, 10 birdies total out there on the round, and they shot like 10 under par, right? Like that, a lot of that is just luck. So that's why I would say maybe even consider scaling back your exposure yourself. I'm not telling you what to do with your money. Obviously, if you think you have an edge out here, then lean into it, right? If you truly see something that you think you can go out there and leverage, then by all means, go out there and do so. But if you're just playing this just for the sake of playing it out there this week, then there's no shame at all in, scaling back your stakes a little bit, right, out there on a week like this. So I just want to be the person to say that, or this is even somebody that does this professionally that's telling you this, saying that on a week like this, it's not one to go crazy and go overboard with it, in my opinion. In terms of putting together lineups, it's a lot of what we had for main slate, just making sure that you have enough leverage in your lineup. So really, we're going to focus on getting our high-owned plays up top for the most part. And in main slate, I had a few 7K teams that I really liked at like 10 to 15% ownership. Ryan Gerard's team is actually close to 20% out there in some contests. I played them despite that sort of ownership mark, but that's over a 4-round sample size. Now that we've made it to Showdown, I already told you guys, right, there's going to be all the overreactions after 18 holes. It's a chaotic format to begin with. It's team golf. No one knows what the hell they're doing out there for round 2 Showdown. I'm really avoiding the chalk in that 7K range. So if I'm going to use anyone that has ownership here for tomorrow, they're going to be there in that 9, 10K range. So like, for example, like a Rory, Shane Lowry, like I haven't built my player pool yet. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to be doing towards the top end of the board, but I know when I put together my projections that they're probably going to be still the highest owned team that we have on the slate. There's still a chance I use those sort of teams, because if you're going to use chalk, you do it towards the top. But because we're in the spirit of trying to get different, trying to go out there and get different to the rest of the field, because it's really the only edge that you have out there for tomorrow, let's start it right off the bat. And I want to refresh this just so that we have the leaderboard up to date, so I have a good idea of where the ownership's coming in. And let's start with a McIntyre, just because he's there at -8. I told you guys, right, those T23s, they play decent golf today, but not great golf like those teams towards the top 15. They're going to get a little bit more steam. So let's throw them in there. Let's also throw in this JT Poston Mitchell group, another one that's over there at that T23 sweet spot. Our third man in is where we're going to start to think about the ownership. So even this McIntyre group that's a little bit lower owned, that Poston Mitchell group, same thing, that's a little bit lower owned, they're still probably going to be like 15% owned, I'd say, over there in GPPs for tomorrow. Again, haven't finished running my projections quite yet. If you want to see the exact numbers, SHIPIT Nation website will have the projections posted. I'll also have them up over there on my Patreon page as well. You can go out there and check those out on. But I'm assuming that they're going to have some ownership there with these two groups. That's why the rest of our lineup is going to be where all of our leverage is coming from. So let's go down here, find some lower owned guys that we can go out there and mix in. For the sake of our first pivot play, let's throw in a Toasty Highsmith. I like those 2 high upside birdie makers, also guys that are in decent recent form. Let's throw in that EVR Bazanehoop group. I already told you guys it looks like they should have made more putts out there today from what I saw out there hole by hole. And they're also not going to be relatively high owned because they're there at T54. You have $6,900 remaining per player. You can throw in a Siwoo Kim, Sangmoon Bae. I'm not sure if they finished their round quite yet, but they're not going to be relatively high owned because they're starting towards the bottom end of the board. And then as long as your last man in here isn't mega chalk, which it is the whole way down here at $6,600. I don't really think there's anyone down here that would qualify as mega chalk. You're going to be fine even if this is in the largest of GBPs, like the big $20, the big $5 GBP that they have for tomorrow, because you have 4 players that are average to below average ownership. And then even the guys up top that you played weren't the chalkiest guys. They weren't the guys that were 25 to 30% owned, like a Shane Lowry, Rory McIlroy, but rather the guys that were towards the middle end of the leaderboard that were kind of going under the radar just a little bit. So that's what I do with my lineup construction. I just try and lean into the chaos a little bit, like know that no one knows what the hell they're talking about. So if there are going to be guys that are that much higher owned than the rest of the field, they're just like almost an automatic fade for me over there in my process. And does that mean that I'm going to automatically go out there and cash? Obviously not, right? I still have to go out there and get my plays correct. But what it does give me a chance to do is if I end up getting players that are optimal plays, I'm not holding hands with 15, 20% of the field. And because it is so hard to narrow down and handicap this team format, this specific sort of event, I'm going to have the same kind of chance, even with guys that are lower owned, as pretty much everyone else in the field, right? There might be a couple exceptions of, quote unquote, good chalk up there towards the top end of the board. I'm more so talking about like from the 8K range down, making those ownership pivots with guys that are lower tier players. That's where you can go out there and make round two, at least give you a chance to go out there and make it a profitable slate. So that's all the main stuff I wanted to talk about over there for the showdown slate. We're going to go through any questions that you have down there in chat for me. So if you have any, feel free to go ahead and throw those down there in the chat right now before we go ahead and hop on out of here. But smash that like button if you guys haven't already as well. Best of luck with everything that you're entering as well. And hope to see you guys towards the top of some of those GPPs. But let me see if there's anything that we need to go through here together. So are there people in first place almost immune to missing the cut? So could they go full Keegan? They could always go out there and shoot like +8 and miss the cut. But I'm assuming the cut, because it normally plays like -1 at this golf course. That's typically the scoring average on the alt shot days. Anywhere between like even and -2 is normally what we see. A lot of that obviously depends on the wind that we're getting for that round. Yeah, if you're -14, I mean, you have to shoot +5. +6 to go out there and miss the cut. Not going to happen to very many groups. So are they immune to missing it? No, but it would take a really, really bad round to go out there and miss the weekend. And do I think the guys at -6 have a chance to make the cut? Absolutely, because I don't think the cut line is going to get too out of hand. Like a -9 is probably as far as it goes. So that's why I said, like, those guys at -14 to miss the cut, they're going to have to shoot like +6, right, to go out there and miss it. But if you're a -3 group, you gain 2 strokes to the field, you go out there and shoot a -3. Yeah, that's going out there and making the cut. Now, is that going to be easy to do? Absolutely not, right? Alt shot on a course with a bunch of water is going to take 2 guys that have their ball striking down. But, gaining 2 strokes to the field is something that tour players do about 20, 25% of the time on average, especially your above average players do that about 20, 25% of the time. So it is it's a possibility for sure. And could I take a look at Crow and Dixon? So yeah, we don't have any shots gained metrics to look at. So I will at least bring up what they did birdie-wise today, but we're not really going to have much to look at. So Dixon had 4 birdies, and then he was with Crow. He had 5 birdies on the round. Yeah, I don't know if we can really take much from that, man. I apologize really not to give you that much more, but I will say they're super cheap. So price tag for round 2 showdown, let me double check on that for you. They're $6,100. They are in the PM wave. So I did mention maybe the AM side is the better side to go out there and play, which I know we didn't even mention over there with the lineup construction segment, but going back to that a little bit, right? If you wanted to lean into the weather, right, that could be another thing that you add on top of that game theory that makes your lineup even better. So kind of rethinking it now, I think a lot of my lineups are going to be AM-centric lineups. So a lot of what we talked about with trying to find those pivots, find AM pivots on top of that. That's going to be what I'm doing for a lot of my lineups. And then don't I think the guys going off early have an edge? Yeah, I said it earlier, Robert, right? I mentioned that out there with the edge. Go back to the first 5 minutes or so, and you can check that out. And you can see my exact thoughts over there on the weather. But that's all I've got over there for this slate, guys. Obviously, go out there, do your due diligence with your research. But I think this is one where you mostly need to be a part of a site where you can feel confident in your projections, whether that's SHIPIT, whether it's a website like mine where I'm posting my projections. If you're at a slapdick site where they couldn't even bother to do content this week, couldn't even bother to go out there and update their projections out there from round to round, then, if you're sweaty tryhard, you're going out there and entering these sort of slates, you're kind of flying in the dark. And I feel for those sort of people out there. So maybe consider joining sites like the SHIPIT Nation, consider joining sites like my own as well to go out there and give you some of that perspective. But that's all I've got over there for the round 2 stream. Hopefully I see you guys out there towards the top of some of those contests, and they're small contests. So it's going to be a pretty small room. Hopefully, it's a small room of a lot of us up there towards the top end of the leaderboards. And I'll see you guys out there for rounds 3 and 4 as well.